In March 2023, we drove across North America to go to an academic conference to deliver a presentation. This took about 43 hours according to Google Maps. We drove across the United States, starting from our place in Vancouver, British Columbia, to Niagara Falls, Ontario, and then back again. It took about 6 days one way and 7 on the return trip. What you're looking at is the dashcam footage from our trip back, driving through Ontario, across Michigan, and west through Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, and finally Washington State. Everyone knows North America is huge, that you can drive for hours and hours and hours straight ahead and just keep going. You may not reach your destination for days. Air travel is most people's go-to solution for getting from one side of the country to the other in just a few hours. But planes artificially shrink the continent, collapsing the distance between cities as we fly over them, making the whole continent feel much, much smaller than it actually is in our collective thoughts.
Didn't you hear? Out in Kansas, a man even got a car to fly.
I hardly think so, Jenny.
And you can pretend that trains don't exist because they basically don't on this continent. They're scarce, slow, and expensive when compared to other places. And because of this, they aren't even a viable option for travel here in North America. But what North America was made for is vehicles. It was made for driving.
With seemingly boundless land stretching coast to coast, the road provides infinite possibilities of what lay ahead.
When we finally arrived at the academic conference after 6 days of driving, as luck would have it, we found a panel titled Roads of America: Travel, Theory, and How We Get There. The speakers at that event asked good questions like, what does it mean to drive across the United States or Canada, places that are so large that you cross a multitude of biomes and cultures? What can be learned through travel? Who is allowed to travel safely? What stories do we think of when we think of hitting the road? And how did highways even become a thing? While stories about long journeys have existed for thousands of years, from ancient folklore to historical pilgrimages, these tales arrived on the scene long before most of the narratives that we're really familiar with, those being the ones that feature cars. Put a person in a car, or any sort of vehicle or mode of travel, walking included, and send them on a journey along a road, path, or highway, and you've got your classic road trip story. These stories typically feature a straightforward mission, purpose, or destination in which characters run into obstacles, derailments, detours, and other people. In all of these tales, the destination is important, but it isn't necessarily the most important thing. Road trip narratives are meant to emphasize personal growth and self-actualization of a character when they arrive at their destination. To sum it up with an overused quote, life is a journey, not a destination. This saying has been misattributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, but it's actually attributed to 19th and 20th century Christian literature, and even Aerosmith. However, Emerson did write, in popular experience, everything good is on the highway. No matter the trip, it's about the experiences along the road that shape you. All these thoughts and questions about road trips, combined with the fact that we had a long time to think on our own long drive, made us wonder about how video games relate to road trips. As an art form, video games are well suited to tell road trip stories. They allow players to explore different encounters and situations and to make choices in an open-world setting, or alternatively, they provide a simulation of travel via a mapped space in a more linear fashion. While we can't always pack up and leave our homes behind, we can experience a virtual version of travel to satisfy our wanderlust, and it helps us to understand the lives of real or fictionalized people by walking miles in their shoes. In the book, The American Road Trip and American Political Thought, author Susan McWilliams Barndt provides a framework for road trip stories and what they mean in relation to bigger ideas of nationality, politics, and belonging. While she designed these categories for literature, we think they can be applied to video games as well. In a nutshell, McWilliams Barndt claims that most North American road trip stories are understood through these 5 categories: the seekers, the walkers, the laborers, the bikers, and the pretenders. Each of these types of characters are motivated to travel for different reasons, and each reveals something about how North American people understand themselves, or hope to, and the place that they're from. Going forward, we're going to speak about some games that we think fit into these categories. However, if you have different ideas for games that could fit, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read them. Seekers hit the road because they have a specific mission or questions that need answers that are found elsewhere. They're looking for something in a literal or figurative sense, and their trip ends when they find it, or when they realize they never will find it. In terms of the literary canon, this type of road tripper is inspired by Walt Whitman, Jack Kerouac, and of course, Emerson. They also ask questions about the nature of relating to other people that they cross paths with. The player is cast into the role of Seeker in one of the earliest popular video games, Oregon Trail. As you traverse the treacherous terrain of 19th century colonial-era USA, you're playing the role of a settler seeking a new life in the West. Along the way, you encounter challenges and setbacks that test your resolve and force you to make difficult decisions. The game also presents opportunities for players to briefly connect with other travelers, highlighting the possibility of fellowship that the Seeker seeks, even if only momentarily, allowing the player to recognize that others are on similar journeys. These interactions also provide bits of trivia about well-known landmarks. Ultimately, the goal of the game is to reach the destination and to realize the settler's dream of a better life, echoing the literary tradition of the Seeker on the open road. The game invites players to explore questions about the nature of the Seeker's journey, including the sacrifices and risks that come with pursuing one's dreams. Likewise, Death Road to Canada also features Seekers. This game draws inspiration from various genres, including arcade beat-em-ups, survival horror simulators, roguelikes, and of course, Oregon Trail. It follows a group of survivors on a road trip to Canada during a zombie apocalypse, where they battle against the hordes, secure supplies, and encounter events that can have positive or negative consequences. The game's mechanics emphasize resource management, including food, fuel, medicine, and character morale. While the tone is distinctly different from Oregon Trail, they share a common theme of survival in the face of adversity on the road. Notably, this game's premise is drawn from how Canada is often portrayed as a safe haven for Americans seeking refuge and medical treatment.
Want to go to Canada now, Riley?
Sure, if no one has any objections.
Additionally, the Seeker archetype fits the characters in Final Fantasy XV because the protagonists embark on a journey with a specific purpose. The main character, Prince Noctis, sets out on a road trip to find his bride-to-be and reclaim his kingdom. Along the way, he faces various challenges and meets new characters, reflecting the Seeker's exploration of the world and encounters with different people in it. The game's use of road trip imagery draws heavily from Americana and the idea of the open road. However, it's a game developed by a Japanese company that takes place in a fantasy world inspired by North America, so the player's experience is somewhat surreal, making it unlike many other existing road trip narratives. As the game's promotional slogan suggests, this is a fantasy based on reality. The walkers, as the name suggests, are people that choose to walk to their destination. This category is inspired by Cheryl Strayed's Wild and John Krakauer's Into the Wild, radical and rugged stories of travel that center around personal strength, determination, and survival. Unlike traditional American road trip stories that feature vehicles, these narratives purposely reject vehicles and position walking as a countercultural act against the American fondness for high-speed travel. The choice to take a journey on foot is unconventional and uncompromising, making walking road trip stories seem extreme and offbeat. The concept of the walker is intimately linked to the video game Death Stranding. The game heavily relies on the standard American mythos. The player must travel west and unite a nation threatened by a separatist faction. The player takes on the role of Sam Porter Bridges, a courier who must deliver goods and packages to remote locations in a world ravaged by supernatural events. Sam must navigate on foot, facing hazards such as rough terrain, harsh weather, and ghostly creatures. The game highlights the value of walking as a mode of travel, forcing players to slow down and appreciate the journey rather than rushing to their destination. In Death Stranding, walking demonstrates the importance of resilience, perseverance, and the ability to overcome obstacles, whether physical or emotional, as necessary components of the human experience. But we're not going to go too far into this because we already have an entire other video about Death Stranding, which you can watch here. As for a less expected entry in the walkers category, the Fallout games often feature fractured roads and skeletal overpasses, more specifically in the more recent games. The highway can be interpreted as the veins of American society. It was thanks to this network that America was able to rapidly industrialize and effectively defend itself, allowing the USA to become a world superpower. To oversimplify the plot, Fallout takes place after an apocalypse caused by a 2-hour war between America, Russia, and China over the Earth's dwindling resources. After the fallout of nuclear annihilation, America's roads fell into disarray and were no longer fit for traversing by vehicle. It's no wonder then that the deterioration of America's highways can also be seen as a deterioration of American values and its people's connection as a nation, making the walking of these routes feel radical and necessary. The game in this series that best resembles the idea of a road trip narrative is probably Fallout New Vegas. In this game, you take the role of a courier who is at the receiving end of a shot to the head. After recovery, the player's goal is made clear: find the shooter and discover the mystery of the Platinum Casino chip. If the main quest lines are followed as intended, and sensible advice from numerous NPCs is taken into account, the player will be guided along a set of broken roads and interstate highways on a walking road trip through the Mojave Desert to New Vegas. The player is presented with mishaps, roadblocks, and even tourist traps. Just don't forget to buy a souvenir on your way to the gift shop. The Laborers is a category of road trip story represented by literary figures Solomon Northup in his memoir 12 Years a Slave, and John Steinbeck in his novel The Grapes of Wrath. These narratives contradict the mainstream mythos of the American road by highlighting the economic exploitation and the injustices that pervade American life. In these road trip stories, the road is a place of obligation and work rather than freedom, and home is the place of comfort and self-governance, where work is self-directed. These narratives symbolize the complexity of the American dream, where fantasy and nightmare scenarios play out on the same public roads, where you could do nothing wrong but bad things will happen to you because of who you are and what you can't change about yourself. While the game doesn't necessarily contain a story, American Truck Simulator does feature elements of a road trip narrative relating to travel as work. Players take the wheel inside of a truck and are instructed to deliver various types of products within and across state lines. This type of game simulates American highways very realistically, as the player has to manage fuel, follow traffic laws, and maneuver around road maintenance when faced with closures. Unlike Fallout, this game is a simulation of how American society functions. The labor of these workers helps to facilitate the movement of goods that supports our consumerist lifestyles, and this represents opportunities and freedoms that living in a capitalistic society promises.
I'm an excellent driver.
Smash. Conversely, we look to the game When Rivers Were Trails, a narrative-based video game that allows players to explore the experiences of indigenous peoples in the late 1890s. This was a time in which their way of life was threatened by the encroachment of American settlers and by government policies. The game takes inspiration from Oregon Trail and is structured as a road trip story. The Anishinaabe protagonist becomes displaced and is forced to travel from Minnesota to California because their nation's land was stolen by settlers. Along the way, the player encounters various challenges and obstacles, meeting many other Indigenous people that have also been subject to colonial violence. You play the role of a character who experiences the world through a context where the road is a place for racial violence, and it's not representative of the freedoms afforded to the colonizing people. Another game that could fit into this category is Road 96. This is a choose-your-own-adventure game that places the player in the role of multiple teenagers who are trying to flee the petrocapitalist country they live in during a very turbulent election cycle. Represented as a countercultural movement, the youths express their discontent for the state by abandoning it at the risk of facing state violence. The game emulates a road trip experience by providing the player with many means to travel to their destination, whether it be on foot, hitchhiking, busing, using a taxi, or even stealing other people's vehicles.
Is this even your car? I don't believe you.
During multiple playthroughs, the player encounters characters that have a developing side story based on the player's decisions, which leads up to multiple possible outcomes on Election Day. Like Northup and Steinbeck's stories, these games make you the protagonist on a road trip defined by obligation, coercion, and work. Bikers are portrayed as bad boys, outlaws, and rugged individualists. This type of road trip story is influenced by Hunter S. Thompson, Robert Pirsig, and Erica Lopez. Motorcycles are symbolic of American ideals of freedom and individualism. The road trip stories of Thompson and Lopez in particular suggest that despite the association between motorcycles and individualism, that motorcycle riders are often looking for alternatives to individualistic ideals, instead longing for a sense of community and recognition within American society. Sayonara Wild Hearts makes use of this concept while also subverting and reimagining the traditional image of the biker. While bikers are typically portrayed as rugged, masculine characters, the game's protagonist is a woman who's trying to overcome the grief of a failed relationship. She reclaims her shattered heart by running from and then toward her problems. Like the bikers in Thompson and Lopez's road trip stories, the protagonist here is portrayed as somebody who is seeking belonging. The game's narrative is not just about rebellion and rejection, it's also about finding forgiveness, inner peace, and self-acceptance. Its use of tarot cards, magical girls, mechs, and other 90s anime fixations, as well as its bop and pop soundtrack, further subverts traditional biker aesthetics, suggesting that the game's protagonist is not just a rebel, but a complex, multifaceted character with a rich inner life. The video game Season, A Letter to the Future, features a protagonist who travels by bicycle through various landscapes, documenting an era before its inevitable end.
The faded optimism of a sweet treat makes me feel sad.
While not explicitly a biker per se, the act of riding a bicycle on long roads and trails can be seen as an extension of the biker's desire for individualism and freedom on the road. However, the character in Season is also driven by a sense of duty to document and preserve the world before it's gone, which can be interpreted as a longing for recognition and belonging to a greater purpose within society. Additionally, the game's emphasis on collecting memorabilia and curating a visual story within the protagonist's notebook can be seen as a way of creating a personal narrative and sense of identity, another theme often explored in biker narratives. Overall, while Season does not directly feature the classic stereotype of the bad boy biker, it does share some common themes and motivations. And lastly, there's the Pretenders. The Pretenders give us a type of road trip story that features people and characters who pretend to be someone that they're not, with the most prominent example being Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. In Huckleberry Finn, deception and disguise are prevalent throughout the story, with nearly every character pretending to be someone else. The novel challenges American ideals of freedom and honesty, showing that to be truly free, one may need to tell certain kinds of lies. McWilliams Barndt says it best.
If Huck's journey is understood as a kind of American education, in which he learns from a wide swath of Americans about how to behave and how to live, the content of that education is quite grim. To flourish and be free, one must lie, and lie well.
The Last of Us combines a travel story with this theme of duplicity. The characters in the game, especially the lead Joel, are forced to conceal things from one another in order to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. Joel suppresses his paternal instincts for Ellie due to his past trauma, while withholding the truth of Ellie's immunity to everyone but his brother, which becomes a significant aspect of Joel and Ellie's relationship. It's also shown in the ending, as well as in the prequel DLC, that Ellie has her own secrets that she hides from Joel, which relates to her trauma involving her relationship with a close friend. In order to safeguard yourself or to protect what matters, one may need to tell certain lies to survive, such as Joel's big lie at the end of the first game. The consequences of that moment unfold throughout the events in the sequel. Another game that could fit into this category is Red Dead Redemption 2. Set in 1899, Arthur Morgan and his gang grapple with the changing Wild West and their own haunted pasts. Arthur, accompanied by a caravan of outlaws and misfits, questions his identity as a good man despite his violent actions. Arthur's friends and acquaintances assure him that he is a good man on the inside, an idea that Arthur can't bring himself to entertain.
You're a good man, Arthur. Underneath, I mean.
I've lost my mind, Mary Beth. It's finally happened. I don't feel in control.
However, as Rain's Fall mentions in one of the game's later missions,
It took a long time for me to learn that you could never change a person. We only become more who we really are.
this is starting to sound familiar.
Do you think I'm a good person? Deep down?
That's the thing. I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is just the things that you do.
Loyalty to his father figure, Dutch Vanderland, leads Arthur down a self-destructive path, where the hypocrisy of the gang's beliefs becomes a growing sickness, both literally and spiritually. Dutch, the charismatic leader turned irredeemable antagonist, deceives his gang with false promises of freedom, which inevitably creates turmoil. Dutch's dishonesty and self-importance leads the gang to travel eastward after a botched robbery, and it becomes evident that their freedom is becoming hindered the farther they travel away from the West in service of his plan.
I got a plan. This is a good one.
The game explores themes of personal growth, morality, and the consequences of one's actions. In the end, Arthur sacrifices himself to give his friend a chance to build a future that was taken away from him, while Dutch remains trapped in his nest of lies, highlighting these two contrasting journeys. Both The Last of Us and Red Dead Redemption 2 can be interpreted as pretender stories, relating to the lie of rugged individualism American culture has typically romanticized since its inception. The bravado these characters display hides deep wounds that eventually become a folly or their downfall. To wrap up, the art of traveling far, far away is a unique experience. The author Susan McWilliams Barndt goes so far as to call the North American road trip the Great American Romance. Whether it's by car, motorcycle, or even on foot, The act of traversing long distances provides a chance for growth, reflection, and discovery. But road trips in particular have become an iconic part of North American culture, celebrated in literature, film, and now even video games. By exploring the vastness of our continent by its highways and trails, we can gain a greater understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Hey, thanks for watching our video. Have you been on a road trip lately? Where did you go? How did you get there? Tell us about it. We'd love to hear about your journey since we told you about ours. As you saw, we played over a dozen games to produce this video, which obviously took quite a bit of time and work to put together. So if you enjoyed this video and our work and want to see more like it, consider dropping us a like and subscribing to our channel. We've got more ideas coming out soon.